Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. I do want to say good evening to all of our Bell families. We're so excited to have you join us this evening so that we can talk to you about the 7 steps you need to know about financial aid. So this is just one particular workshop that we're offering for you, but please pay attention to your emails because your Bell advisors will be sharing some additional information with you. So I just want to let you know that we have a few of our Bell advisors that are here with us this evening that will be presenting with us. So my name again is Tequila Barnes Hall. So if you're in the 336 telephone area code, then I am your Bell advisor. We also have Amy Ditton. She is our Bell advisor for the 252 area code. And we also have Juana Hernandez, who is our Bell advisor who covers Spanish services. So we're very happy to have you all join us this evening. Now, just a few housekeeping rules before we begin. Just want to make sure that you're muting yourself so that we have a wonderful experience. And as we're speaking, if you have questions that you want to put in the chat, you're welcome to do that. But we are going to actually have a Q&A at the very end. So again, thank you so much for joining us, and we're going to have a great time this evening. I want to just tell you about CFNC. So what is it? College Foundation of North Carolina is a service of the state. And what we do is we help you with career planning, academic planning, applying, and paying for college. So hopefully you've seen a lot of information throughout your school that talk about some of the services that we offer. Now you'll see kind of like a clock diagram on our screen. I just want to make sure you know all the people that collaborate together to make CFNC possible. So we do have CFI, or College Foundation, Inc. We have our independent colleges and universities, the UNC system schools, your community colleges, the State Education Assistance Authority, as well as the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction. So together we make College Foundation of North Carolina. So again, we're going to talk about 7 steps to help you prepare financially for college. So I'm going to start off with just talking to you about step 1. So know before you go. So one of the things that you want to make sure you know as you're preparing for your colleges that you're applying to right now, or you might be applying to in the future if you're a Bell Scholar who's joining us that is younger than senior year, but you want to know your estimated cost of attendance. So you may not know the exact figure or how much it costs you to go to the college or university, but what we're doing is asking that you get a rough idea of how much it may cost you to attend the college or college of your choice. So right now, if you are a Bell Scholar and you're a senior, then we definitely want you to have at least 3 or 4 serious colleges that you might apply to. Now, when we think about college costs,
Hey, Tequila, can we pause for just a second? Juana had a good point, and I apologize for our attendees. Does anybody on the call need to hear this in Spanish so that Juana can, certainly whether it be parents or whoever it may be, should we just take care of that first? We forgot about that in the beginning. So if anyone would like to hear in Spanish, or if your parents, you let us know, and then we could get you separately with Juana to make sure that we can provide that for you. Just unmute yourself and let us know.
Amy, I'm going to repeat that in Spanish.
Yeah.
Si hay alguien en esta sesión que quiera esta información en español, pueden mandar un mensaje en el chat, o si pueden dejarnos saber, va a ser su mano para yo mandarles un link que va a ser separado a esta presentación. Solamente déjenos saber y con mucho gusto podemos mudarnos a otro cuarto para proveer la información en español. Gracias. Thank you, Amy.
You're welcome. Sorry about that, Tequila, but we just wanted to make sure of that first.
No, that's okay. Again, we'll just pick up with step 1. So of course, step 1 is know before you go. So as we're talking about college costs, we definitely want you to have a rough idea of how much it's going to cost you to go to the college or university of your choice. So in your senior year, or as a senior Bell Scholar, we want you to have at least 3 or 4 serious colleges that you might be considering. Now, of course, if you're younger than senior year, this is still really good information for you. And it's good to also research and find out how much your college, when you're ready to apply, may cost. So when we look at college costs, we want to look at college costs as direct costs as well as indirect costs. So as we're talking about direct costs, we're talking about things that you're actually going to receive a bill for. So that would be tuition, required fees, room and board, or you might hear room and meals. And then we have indirect costs. So these are things that you may not necessarily be receiving a bill for, but they still impact the college experience. So we're talking about things like books and supplies, your transportation, personal and miscellaneous expenditures, and you might incur some loan fees. Step 2, determine your financial situation. So what can you and your family afford to pay? So that's a really good question for you to consider. What type of college do you want to attend? So that might be a 2-year institution that's public, a 4-year public institution. It could be a 4-year private institution. And the cost will vary based upon the institution that you're considering. And do you have a college savings account, such as a 529 account? So of course, 529 accounts are common, and they do help you to save for all different types of qualified educational expenditures. Now, step 3, know the types of financial aid. So as we define financial aid is money that pays for college, or it could be vocational school. So the types of aid that are available would be gift aid. And so gift aid is free money. That's money that you do not have to repay. And that's what we always encourage our students to seek out. So of course you see scholarships, and scholarships can come from a variety of resources. And as you know, by being Bell Scholars, there are some awards that you may get as early as middle school. And then of course, there may be a few others along the way, but the bulk of them will come when you're a senior in high school. And then you can still seek out scholarship opportunities once you're attending the college or university of your choice. But scholarships can be based upon various criteria. It could be based upon academics. You have a special talent or ability. So it could be that you're athletic, based upon music. It could be based upon the type of institution that you plan to attend. Maybe you know what you want to major in. That might be important. Groups or organizations that you're connected with, parents, employers. If you're part of a faith-based organization, we can continue on. There's not one place that has every single scholarship that's out there for you to apply on one site. But I will tell you, there are many sites that are really good, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later in our discussion this evening. Now, as you're looking for scholarships, I can't tell you how many to apply for, but just apply for as many as you know that you meet the eligibility requirements for. And some awards are first come, first served, so be mindful of that. So know the deadlines and make sure you're exceeding those deadlines. Know if a scholarship is one time or if it's renewable. If it's one time, you're only going to get it once. If it's renewable, how is it renewable? So what do you need to do to continue to get that award? And then also under gift aid, you also see grants. So that's money that you're receiving based upon financial consideration. And my colleagues and I are going to talk to you a little bit about grants as we continue on. And then if you don't get all the scholarships and grants you're looking for, we have another type of aid, and we call it self-help aid. So that would come into you in the form of loans. And so there are loans out there that you can take out for yourself, or there are loans, or there are loans that your parents can take out for your education. So you might hear the term direct loan. So there are need-based and non-need-based direct loans that are for students, and those are not based upon creditworthiness. Then there are loans that your parents can take out for you if you are a dependent student. We're going to talk about that. And we call them PLUS loans, parent loans for undergraduate students. So those particular loans are based upon creditworthiness. And like I said, we're going to talk about that a little bit later as we continue on our presentation. You also see employment. And as we talk about employment opportunities, this will be work study. So work study allows a student to work a job on campus or in a community service setting. And many times you're paid minimum wage. Sometimes you may be paid a little bit more. And then again, you'll also see family savings. Now, you'll see at the bottom of my screen, we already touched on merit-based aid. And again, we talked about academics, music, athletic, scholarships, and then need-based aid. That will be things like Pell Grant. And as we talked about just a moment ago, it could be based upon loans. So step 4, know the application process. So one of the things that you're going to hear a lot in the senior year in high school is FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid. So again, FAFSA is free application for federal student aid. That means that you should not be paying anyone to help you do this application. Now, you complete the FAFSA form as soon as you can on or after October 1 of the senior year if you want to be considered for federal and state grants, federal loans, federal work study. Some schools may also use this document to consider you for their institutional aid. So definitely want to make sure that you're aware of that. Now, there are schools that may have priority filing dates where they want you to get your FAFSA form into them by a certain time. And if you're not sure about that, you definitely want to look at the college's website and learn a little bit more about, what they have said for priority filing dates. So that means that you're actually going to the financial aid office page. So I know right now, many of you are probably looking at the admissions page for colleges and universities. Now, the official website for FAFSA is FAFSA.gov. So again, you'll see FAFSA.gov. Now, we also encourage our students and parents to create what we call a FSA ID, so a Federal Student Aid ID. Students, you need to create your own FSA ID, and parents, you need to create your own FSA ID. So it doesn't take long, so maybe 5 or 10 minutes to go through that process. And that will allow you to be able to sign the FAFSA form electronically, as well as to have access to Department of Education systems. So the website that you want to access that information from or begin that process would be fsaid.ed.gov. So fsaid.ed.gov. So I'm going to turn this slide over to my colleague, Juana Hernandez, and she's going to talk to you a little bit about eligibility for financial aid.
Thank you, Tequila. So some of the things we have to keep in mind is that not everyone is going to be eligible to qualify for federal and state funding. And so you have to ensure that in order to receive the federal and state funding here in North Carolina for states, you have to meet the eligibility requirements for financial aid. So here's a list of the eligibility requirements, which includes you must be a U.S. citizen of the U.S. or be an eligible non-citizen. For eligible non-citizens, that includes anyone who is a permanent resident, someone who has an I-94 in which it indicates that they are a refugee, they have asylum granted. Keep in mind that with asylum, it must be granted. There are a lot of families that are in process of asylum. And so if you are in process, you're not going to be eligible. It has to be granted. A lot of people get confused with that. Also, if it indicates that you're a parolee or a Cuban Haitian entrant, you could be eligible. If you have if your parents or you have a T visa, then you can also receive or be eligible for financial aid. And if you're a battered immigrant alien, or if your parents are battered immigrant aliens, which really it's if they have the VAWA, then you can qualify for federal aid. And VAWA stands for Women's Violence Against Women's Act. There are some families that have this status, or and so they're eligible to receive this aid. And also, if you are a resident of the Republic of Palau, the Republic of the Marshall Island, or the Federated States of Micronesia, or Canadian-born Native American. So another thing that I wanted to mention here is that what matters is the student's eligibility. It does not matter if the parents don't have, aren't residents or not citizens, or the parents are undocumented or don't have a social security number. It's okay for the students to still complete a FAFSA application as long as they have the eligibility, they meet the eligibility requirements.
So now I want to talk to you a little bit about the basic principles of financial aid. And so we're going to be sharing this information with you so that you'll have it to review. And also share some handouts that will have this information after our presentation. So make sure you connect with your bail advisor so that you can get that information. So again, we talked about the cost of attendance. So that COA, that's definitely something that you want to find out. And once you know the cost of attendance and you have completed your FAFSA or your free application for federal student aid, you take the cost of attendance less your EFC, and you'll know if you have eligibility for need-based funds at any institution. Now, I want you to understand your EFC will be the same no matter what type of college you're attending. So it doesn't matter if you're going to a community college, doesn't matter if you're going to a four-year public or four-year private institution, your EFC number will be the same. But the cost of attendance will vary from institution to institution, so your eligibility might be different. I also want to just talk to you a little bit about the FAFSA application. Now, the FAFSA application has many parts of the application, and really it's written like you, the student, are doing it. And I know there are many times when you and your parents are doing it together. So I want to make sure that you know what section you're in. Are you in the student section or are you in the parent section, to make sure the right information is being put into the application. Now, the other thing I want you to know is that there's lots of help for you for FAFSA, and we're going to be sharing some information with you about how you can get some additional help with the FAFSA. But I do want to let you know that as you go through the application, don't feel like you have to do it all at one time. You can start, you can stop, you can come back to it. And then as we go through the FAFSA, if there is something you don't understand, there's lots of helpful tips or things that are on the site that you can click on to learn a little bit more information about a question. There's also a toll-free number that you can call where you can get help that way. Or if you're on the FAFSA website and you prefer to chat, you can chat. So it's just any way that you feel comfortable with. It doesn't matter how you flow, but we definitely want to make sure you know what help is available. And like I said, at the very end of our presentation, we're going to talk to you about some other resources that will be beneficial to you. And also your bail advisors will be sharing some additional information with you. Now, 95% of the information on the FAFSA form, you already know the answers to. So that's going to make it easy. There's only a few parts that you might need a little bit more information. You might have to look up some things. Now, when you go to the FAFSA website, there is a FAFSA on the web worksheet that you can actually take advantage of, and you can download it and you can actually put in your answers that the FAFSA form will present. And then, you know, you can kind of do like data entry. Some people like the FAFSA on the web worksheet. Some people just prefer just to go and put in their information as they go, but it's really a preference. So here on my screen, you'll see information about dependency status. And I want to let you know that the FAFSA application that you guys need to be working on is the 2021-22 FAFSA. So again, when you go to the FAFSA website, make sure you're in the 2021-22 FAFSA. So if you cannot answer yes to any of the questions that I'm about to talk to you about, then for financial aid purposes, you will be a dependent student. If we find that you're a dependent student, that means your parents will need to also provide their information. So basically, we want to know, are you at least 24 years of age? Are you married? Are you working on a graduate degree? Do you have children of your own who you provide more than half the support for? Are you active duty in the U.S. Armed Forces? And here, I just want to make sure we're talking about purposes other than training. Or are you a veteran or the U.S. Armed Forces? So are you a veteran of the U.S. Armed Forces? Probably not, right? So if you can't answer yes to anything here, then we're going to look at another set of questions to see if you can answer yes to any of these. So at any time since your student turned 13, were student's parents deceased, student in foster care, was a student a dependent award to court, as determined by a court is or was an emancipated minor, as determined by a court is in a legal guardianship, or at any time on or after July 1, 2020, was the student homeless or self-supporting and at risk of being homeless. If you cannot answer yes to any of these questions that I just mentioned to you, then for financial aid purposes, that means that you are dependent. And so I'm actually going to turn it over to my colleague, Amy, and she's going to talk to you a little bit more about the steps, and she's going to talk about step 5. But before she takes over, I do want to let you know, if you cannot answer yes to any of those things that we talked about, that means that you are now considered a dependent student.
All right, thank you, Tequila. And I also wanted to make sure you did know that only if you are a graduating high school senior planning to go to college next fall would you be filling out the FAFSA now. So until you do plan to graduate, you don't have to worry about the FAFSA yet. And I think we did state that earlier. So these are the questions and these are the type of information you would need to know regarding that dependency or independent status is if you're graduating now and planning to go to college next fall. If you're not, and I know some of you on the call are not, then certainly just be prepared that this is what you're going to have to share and provide on the FAFSA when it's your turn to fill it out. So if indeed, as Tequila just said, if you are a dependent student upon your parents, then that means parents must provide information on the FAFSA. So who are your parents? That kind of sounds like a silly question, doesn't it? But when it comes to the federal government, these are the only 4 classifications of people that can provide their financial information and their names and other demographic data on the FAFSA. So if you are living with biological or adoptive parents, whether they're married or not, both of those parents provide information on the FAFSA. Maybe you have a single parent, never been married or widowed, and it's just that one parent. Maybe you are in a separated or divorced living household situation where your biological or adoptive parents are separated and you live primarily with one of those parents. And that's the question you need to ask. Who's going to be the parent that helps me on the FAFSA? So if you are living more than 50% of the year with one of those parents, that's the parent that you put on the FAFSA. If for some reason, if for any reason, that parent is now remarried and there is a step parent in the household, then the step parent's data goes on the FAFSA too, okay? Let me throw this scenario out there to you. If you're in a situation like this and your parents have separated or divorced, and if you have 50% custody and 50% living with one parent and 50% living with the other parent, then what do? You then ask yourself, who provides the greater financial support for you in that living situation? Whichever that parent is that's providing the greater financial support, and it could be like who's covering you on insurance, who's paying your cell phone bill, who may be providing the majority of your clothing, whatever it may be, that's the parent that you provide on the FAFSA. So grandparents, aunts or uncles, other relatives, godparents, unless they have adopted you, they can't file the FAFSA with you. That presents other situations and special circumstances that if you're living with someone else other than a parent, that we can help you with down the road, and certainly also the colleges that you have interest in attending. So we'll go to the next slide, Tequila, and talk about that information. I keep referencing that information on the FAFSA and that data. Much of that information that parents are going to have to provide will be regarding their taxes. So their adjusted gross income, any other tax liability, and that information would be pulled from their IRS tax return that they completed, and maybe any untaxed income. So the untaxed income could be examples, for example, like child support. If child support is coming into the household, then you report it as untaxed income. Maybe it's going to be distributions from an IRA or a 529 withdrawal, 529 savings account. It could be some other form of disability. Whatever that may be, you report that information on the FAFSA. So here's the rule of thumb to remember regarding the year of the data that you're going to be reporting. The federal government calls it prior, which means 2 years ago. So when you're looking at this information, and it will tell you on the FAFSA, you're going to pull that information from 2 years prior to the year of enrollment that you're going to be in college. So for example, let's use this year. If a student is graduating from high school this year, planning to go to college next fall, that's the fall of 2021, then you're going to use 2019 tax information on that FAFSA. If you're going to be in college in the fall of, let's just use this for an example, in the fall of 2024, then you're going to use 2022 tax data on the FAFSA, okay? Now, of course, the government wants to know what families have in assets, like in checking accounts, savings accounts. So as of the date that you submit the FAFSA, that's the date that the government wants to know the values of these things you're seeing on this slide. What you have in cash value, savings, money market accounts, checking accounts, any real estate or investment. The good news, parents, if you have 401ks, like your retirement, you don't get to report those on the FAFSA. That's protected for you. If you have the value of the home that you live in is protected, you don't report that on the FAFSA. If any of you have small family businesses or a family farm, and with less than 100 employees, then you don't report the values of that business or that farm. So that's helpful for you too. Otherwise, you do report the values of the farm if it's more than 100 employees, or if you live in Johnston County and you have a farm down in Hyde County, then you have to report that value of that farm in the other county because you're not living on it. You're living in Johnston County, for example. So that's the information that you're going to be prepared to use on the FAFSA. I think, Juana, we may want you to explain this information about parents if they don't have Social Security numbers, and then I'll pick back up.
Sure, yes, of course. I will talk about this briefly. As I mentioned earlier, not every student is going to be eligible for financial aid, but if there is a student who is eligible, but maybe they have parents who don't have a Social Security number, they can still complete the FAFSA, but there are different steps that students are going to need to take. So if there is a student who whose parents do not have a social security number, they still need to complete the FSA ID. However, the parents will not be able to create the FSA ID. You do need a social security number for that. Even if your parents have an ITIN number or a USCIS number or an alien registration number, they cannot use that to create the FSA ID. So if there's no social, they will not be able to create it, but the student will. So once the student is working on the FAFSA, they'll enter their information and answer the questions on finances and information about their parents. And there's going to be a question that is going to ask you for your parent's social security number. If your parents do not have a social security number, just enter zeros. Keep in mind that when you're doing FAFSA, and if you enter zeros for your parents, then you're going to get an error message. The error message is going to kind of come up towards the end of the application. And it's basically going to tell you you've entered zeros for your parents, but you didn't file a international tax form. So if you get an error message, basically all you have to do is click on the option that says check for errors. If you entered zeros for both parents, then that message is going to come up twice. And so you'll click on check for errors again. So whenever it comes up, just click on check for errors and you should be able to continue with your FAFSA application. Since your parents do not have a social security number, you will not be able to use the data retrieval tool. And never use an ITIN number. That's a very common mistake that we see with parents. They're entering the ITIN number. And if you're confused between an ITIN number and a social security number, if you look at the number that is on your parents' tax return and it starts with a 9, that is an ITIN number. It is not a social security number, so do not enter that number. And so towards the end, whenever it's time to sign your FAFSA, the student will be able to sign electronically, and the parent will not be able to sign electronically since they were unable to create the FSA ID. So what the parent needs to do is they will need to print the signature page, they will need to sign it, and they will need to mail it to the Department of Education, which is an address that is on the form. Now, one very important step that a lot of students forget to do once they print the signature page is they forget to submit the FAFSA. So once you print that page, make sure to submit the FAFSA. It's going to tell you, are you sure you want to submit without signatures? And as long as you printed the signature page, as long as you've submitted your signature, then you should submit the FAFSA without the parent's signature. Once you mail that signature page, it's going to take a few weeks for you to get notification that the Department of Education has received your FAFSA application. But again, we just wanted to review these steps in case there were any students that may be in this situation or experience this type of scenarios. And if you have questions, just feel free to call us, reach out to us, or call the Department of Education. They also have a helpline as well.
Cool, thank you, Juana. And speaking of the IRS data retrieval tool that Juana just referenced, if indeed you are a candidate to do the data retrieval, then what that means is if there are taxes that are already on file and sitting with the IRS, you will have the option to import that data sitting at the IRS into your FAFSA. So you'll be asked a couple questions first. And remember, I see it, we put in parentheses, student and parents. So if student, when it's your time to do the FAFSA, and if you have worked and you made enough money to file taxes, then you're going to be expected to answer the same types of financial questions as your parents. So we want to make sure you understand this is just not all about your parents. It includes your involvement too if you work and file taxes. So if you filed your taxes, and if you file the right tax filing status, let's bounce back to that slide, Tequila. Then you are going to be a candidate to do the data retrieval. If you are not a candidate to do the data retrieval, then that's okay. What that simply means is you're going to refer to your tax return and fill out the questions manually on the FAFSA. And the FAFSA will tell you, based on the tax return form that you completed, which line item to go pull the data. So it makes it a little bit easier for you to complete that section regarding financial information. Thank you, Tequila. We'll move on to the next slide. So the sources of financial aid that you should expect to see some sort of funding, we hope. Remember, The process of getting funding for college is completely free. Never should you be paying a college or any other solicitors that come after you to say, hey, I'll help you file your FAFSA, or hey, I'll help you find some scholarships. Typically, it's a scam because at some point in time, they're probably going to ask you for some money, and some money to help you find scholarships or money to help you file the FAFSA. But this whole process is free. So we have a little campaign going on at CFI that that's the example of the brochure there on the slide. Don't get hooked. Don't fall for those preys that come after you to say, we'll charge you just a little bit of money to get you money for college. The 5 areas that you're going to find the funding is the federal and the state government. That's the FAFSA. So when you fill out that FAFSA, we're going to find out for you, are you eligible for any federal grants, federal loans, or state grants? So that's it. You file the FAFSA and that's it. Now, secondly, we know your college or university that you're looking at may have resources. On top of those merit-based scholarships, maybe they're going to have some institutional grants that you could qualify for, or other academic scholarships, merit scholarships, when you're in the academic department that you intend to major. So look out for those and ask your colleges what may be available. Thirdly, your local and private organizations. Most of these will come via your school counselors. So check with your school counselors, be it on their school websites or their physical offices. Whenever the day comes, we may be back in school, that you can ask what types of scholarships are available for me to apply. If you're not a graduating senior this year, we recommend that even if you're a 9th grader, 10th grader, 11th grader in high school, that you start looking out for those locally based scholarships to see what you may need to do to be eligible to apply for them. Fourthly, check out the list of state-based scholarships that we have at CFNC. And the shortcut for those is cfnc.org/scholarships. All of you can be looking at those now. If you're not a graduating senior, you may not be eligible to apply yet or be considered for them, but at least you'll know what your options are available when it's time, okay? And fifthly, national databases of scholarships. Scholarships that every student in North Carolina would be up against with every other student in the nation. We'll give you some examples of those in a couple slides, but we just want to make sure you understand that when a college is ready to process your FAFSA to determine what types of monies they can give you, these are all the sources of where those dollars could come from within that institution and outside of that institution. Okay, we'll go to the next slide. Speaking of the federal and state governments, we're going to run through these very quickly. Remember, I said all you need to do is fill out the FAFSA, and then the college will decide, do you qualify for any of these programs? So the federal government offers some federal grants and loans. Pell Grant is one of the largest grant programs in our nation. Another is the SEOG grant, Federal Work Study. That's having a job on a college campus, working a couple of hours per week in between your class schedules, and you get paid for that. And usually those funds are for you to get paid and you spend them however you wish, unless that's a choice, of course, between you and your parents of how you use those dollars. When it comes to student loans and parent loans, the federal government can lend money to families to help support the bottom line balance of going to that institution. Anytime you see the word Stafford loan, know that that's relating to the student, and there are 2 different types. These 2 different types have a lot to do with the way that the interest is accruing or not accruing on that loan. For example, subsidized means that no interest is accruing on that loan while you're in college. That's considered the need-based loan that Tequila mentioned earlier. You will be responsible for the interest once the repayment period begins, but that's not until after 6 months after you graduate will you start a standard repayment of 10 years. That's 120 payments that you'll pay back all of your accumulation of loans while you're in college. Unsubsidized is just the opposite. Interest will accrue on that loan when it's placed on your account, and you'll continue to be responsible for interest as you go through college. Interest rates are set right now for this school year. We won't know interest rates for next year or for subsequent years until the summer before that year of enrollment. That's when the federal government releases those interest rates. And parents that are on the call, I want to make sure you can rest assured that students, as long as they are dependent students upon you, their loan eligibility is capped. So a student just can't go borrow $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 from the federal government. The federal government doesn't allow it. So based on the number of credit hours that student has, that puts them in a classification of a freshman, sophomore, junior, or senior, that's how it's determined how much money they can borrow. So the maximum between a subsidized and unsubsidized for a first-time freshman would be $5,500. That's the max. You could qualify, for example, $3,500 in subsidized. That's the max you can receive in subsidized. But then you could borrow another $2,000 in unsub. And that's your combination of $5,500 a year. And it kind of goes up each year. So as a sophomore, it's $6,500. As a junior, it's $75,000. And as a senior, it's $75,000. Okay? Now let's move on to the parents. Parents, all it takes is one of you to apply. Both parents' credits do not have to be checked, just one parent. You go through a credit check where your students don't. Your students don't have a cosigner, they don't have credit checks. You do though. And if you are approved, then you get to borrow the balance of the cost of attendance that Tequila talked about earlier and the amount of financial aid that your student has been awarded. So whatever that balance is here is the amount of your eligibility. You see on the slide here that your interest rate as a parent loan is higher than the student. That's why we recommend a lot that the student exhausts their loan eligibility first, because their interest rate will always be lower than the parent. At least always is lower as far as we can project. And as a graduate student, understand if you move on beyond your bachelor's degree to get a master's or a doctorate, the federal government can lend you loan monies to students. So that's the federal program. We're going to move on to the state grant funding now. And again, remember, all you need to do is file the FAFSA. If you're planning to attend one of our 16 UNC campuses and you qualify, they offer the UNC need-based grant. If you're planning to go to a community college and you qualify, any of our 58 community colleges can offer you that particular grant. Our private or independent institutions, and we have 36 of them, you could qualify for the North Carolina Need-Based Scholarship. And the last one you see, the lottery scholarship, that's awarded only to students who qualify going to one of our public institutions, our UNC system campuses or our 58 community colleges. All right, so we'll move on to the next. So that was step 5, understanding your aid options and understanding who parents are to help file you on the FAFSA. Step 6, everybody should apply. Despite what we've talked about a lot tonight about income of a household and how that makes students eligible for need-based, or perhaps it would not make them eligible for need-based, we want students to understand and families to understand that in order to be considered for all possible aid options, they need to file the FAFSA. And every year, your situation could change, so that could affect your student's eligibility. We also wanted to make mention that some of you, as you're applying to college, may be interested in certain institutions in our state and outside of our state that will require an additional financial aid form called the CSS profile. This is through College Board, has nothing to do with CFNC, but it's another detailed form that you'll need to complete if you're looking at certain institutions. And I'm going to name the 5 in North Carolina. So if you're interested in Davidson, Duke, Elon, UNC Chapel Hill, or Wake Forest University, those 5 colleges in our state will require the CSS profile too. You do it hand in hand as you're doing your FAFSA and your applications for admission. A lot of school counselors tell me that perhaps they recommend to students not to complete the profile until they have become an accepted student at that institution. So you certainly, take the advice of your school counselor when it's that time. if indeed you need to complete it. And we'll move on. Sometimes in your household, regarding everyone should apply, and when I mentioned every year your situation could change, family situations a lot of times cannot be documented on the FAFSA. There's no place for you to record these types of special circumstances on the FAFSA. So what do? If after you have filed the FAFSA at any point in time as you're progressing through college and something changes, like employment status for a parent, they lose their job, their hours are reduced, God forbid a death in the family, a change in a parent's marital status, or outstanding medical bills, make sure you're explaining that to the financial aid office so they can offer you as best of assistance as they can. Please note that every college treats this differently on in their campus. So one college could offer you additional aid, the other college may not. So either way, you give them the fair chance to make sure they give you all the possibilities of aid. So after you fill out the FAFSA, if any of these things happen, share it with the financial aid office. Okay, we'll move on. And another thing we want to make sure that you're prepared for coming up. We in North Carolina have a centralized way of determining who are residents of our state. And the purpose in which we need to know if you're residents is twofold. We need to know, number one, so those public institutions, those are our 16 UNC system schools and our 58 community colleges, they need to know if you're an in-state resident so they can only charge you the in-state tuition rate. Our private schools in North Carolina have no difference in charges of whether you're in-state or you're coming from out of state. It's the same tuition. But the public schools really need to know this. And overall, all of our institutions need to know if you are a resident of our state so that they could consider you for any type of state grant funding. Remember those 4 that I just talked about? Those are the grants. So if you're a resident, then we could consider you for those state grants. When it's time for you to do the residency, which would be your senior year of high school as you're preparing for college, you're going to go through ncresidency.org, or you can click on the link through CFNC.org, because residency is just a behind-the-scenes page, so to say, a behind-the-scenes service of College Foundation of North Carolina. So that's why you're going to use your username and password for your CFNC profile to log into your residency. Okay, that's pretty simple, pretty easy. So make sure you're keeping up with your CFNC account as you go through high school. Most of the questions about residency will be asked about parents because that's the law. The residency for a student is determined by where the domicile or the residency of the parent. So we recommend quite often that parents are involved in this process, or if they're capable and comfortable, let them sit down behind the computer and drive the residency interview. And it's just that, it's an interview. They're going to ask you some questions, and your parents are going to know more likely where to find those answers than you, the student. The result of your residency interview is called your RCN, your Residency Certification Number, and that stays with you for all of your years of college. You never have to complete the residency more than one time, as long as you're maintaining consistent enrollment at the same institution. If at any point in time you transfer, then you may have to do your residency interview all over. So just keep that in mind. You primarily just do it one time unless you choose to transfer or stay out of school for a while and then return to school later. Okay, so that's a little bit about residency. We'll move on to the next slide. I can't remember if we were going to have Juana to talk about this a little bit too. I can certainly share with you, or Juana, that's up to you.
I can cover it, Amy, it's fine. So again, just wanted to share some information for students who may be in special circumstances or come from mixed status families. So when completing Residency Determination Service, if you are a DACA, or if you are an undocumented student, or even if you're a student who, if you know you don't qualify for in-state tuition, so you would just when you're completing RDS, you would just select the option that says that you do not claim to be a North Carolina resident. But DACA and undocumented students are not eligible for in-state residency, but you still need to complete the RDS. And similar to the FAFSA, if students have parents with undocumented parent, if their students have undocumented parents, they can still complete and should still complete RDS, but understand and know that there are also different steps to keep in mind. If your parents don't have a social security number, with RDS, they can actually enter an ITIN number if they have it. They can also enter their USCIS, ARN number, so they do accept other numbers, so just keep that in mind. And if they don't have a social or any other number, then they can just say that they wish not to supply an identification number. There are also many other statuses that are eligible for in-state residency. So if you look at the FAFSA eligibility, RDS actually has a more extensive list of eligible statuses. So if you're not sure whether or not you would be eligible because you're here on a visa, you're here on, or you have some type of status and you're not sure if you're eligible, I would encourage you to visit ncresidency.org and take a look at that list. We do have some handouts in Spanish in case you need some support with the steps of the different process with RDS.
Cool, thank you, Juana. And we're gonna wrap up the presentation and offer any opportunities for questions as we finalize this. So step 7, we've covered a whole lot of ground tonight, and I know that it can be somewhat confusing or overwhelming, but what can you be doing now? If you are that graduating senior, then it should be continuing to research scholarships and applying to colleges and doing your RDS. It's never too late, whether you're a graduating senior or not, to start saving up for college, whether it be establishing a North Carolina 529 savings account or some other banking account, but putting money to the side and saving for that big purpose or that big day. Continuing to navigate CFNC and some of these other calculators that we have. Just do Google searches for them and you'll find them at the College Navigator. Every college is required to have on their website a net price calculator. So you can plug in some of your data and get a generalized idea of what types of aid you could receive to attend that institution. And keep attending meetings that your high school may host, or as you're progressing through, middle school may host, to help you with preparing for college one day, no matter what that college choice may be, whether it's a 2-year community college, 4-year public or private, or a trade school, or some other type of certification after high school. They're here to help you just as much as we are here at CFNC and your Bell Scholars. So we'll finalize with the next few slides. Some of those websites that I referenced earlier, specifically take a reference at those at the bottom, like College Board, FastWeb, Peterson's, and College Greenlight. Those are some of those national databases of scholarships that we'll recommend to you to get established. For all of those, it's a pretty tedious task for you to create your username and password in your profile, I should say. But the whole point of that is this. Once you answer all those questions about your profile, the database will go out to search to find any scholarships that match your profile. And once you get a match, you're going to get emails. So even as a 9th grader, 10th grader, 11th grader, 12th grader, you can do this. And be prepared to start reading through these scholarship opportunities to decide which will be the best ones for you to apply. We have so many other services in our state that we can help you with too. If by chance you or any of your friends or colleagues may be foster youth, then the North Carolina REACH program is for you. The Golden Leaf, check out that website to see if your county is eligible for the Golden Leaf. And that's an application scholarship process you can apply for as a senior. Go to the ones at cfnc.org that I shared earlier, /scholarships. And we also have a forgivable loan for service program. So if you are thinking about certain academic majors, one of those being nursing, also high need teaching areas like the sciences, math, special education, and multiple health related fields, go there to cfnc.org FELS, and it's just one, cfnc.org FELS, to see the long list of majors and how that program works. You'll be more interested in it, indeed, I think, if you intend to major in those specific areas. And we'll move on to Keila. I think you're going to pick up here, Tequila, and share some information.
Absolutely. Thanks, Amy. So now we want to talk to you a little bit about how to use your Victor Bell Scholarship. So I know that some of our Bell Scholars are getting questions about how things work, or you've forgotten since it's been a while, especially for our seniors and also for our families who have students who are not yet seniors. We just want to make sure that you remember how to use your Victor Bell Scholarship. So one of the things that we want to talk about is your Victor Bell renewal your renewal or your dispersal form. So your renewal and dispersal forms will be either emailed or mailed to you guys, usually in May or early June. And forms will have the amount eligible to be used for that coming year. Now, I want to make sure that you guys keep in mind that we have to make sure that we have the most current email address as well as the most current mailing address for you, because sometimes there's information that we need to get out to you. So we want to make sure you're able to get these forms that we're talking about. I also want to let you know that you're going to need to provide some of the documents that you see listed here on my screen to receive your funds. So your transcript. So if you're a high school student on the webinar, that'll definitely mean that we need to get your transcript. Even once you go to college, we're going to also need your college transcripts, and we'll make sure that we're keeping up with where you are, what we need, and get the information to you. And don't forget, you can always reach out to your Bell advisor if you're not sure. Cost of attendance: the first year college students will need to provide a letter of acceptance. So if you're a senior on the webinar this evening, that means you. If you're younger than senior year, you have a little while before you have to worry about that. So to make it easy for you guys, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic, we want to make sure that you are able to email information back to us. So, it doesn't necessarily have to be via mail. So if email is easier for you, then you can email information to us at bellscholarship@cfi.org. So again, bellscholarship@cfi.org. And so we'll also accept photo images of forms that way. And just anytime you have questions about the Bell Award, you can always email that same email address as well as your Bell advisor. So funds will be sent to your school within 5 business days. I just want to make sure that you're aware of that. Just some important notes. Please send in the renewal form, even if you're not planning on attending college right now. So we still need to have some information on file to refer back to. Now, another thing that sometimes you may not know as a Bell Scholar, you have 8 years to use the funds from the date that you graduate from high school. Of course, the Bell Scholarships can be placed on an 8-year hold if needed. So just make sure that you're aware of that. And then again, we still need to make sure that you're sending in your paperwork so we kind of know where you stand or if something has changed. Your scholarship will only remain in place if you send back your renewal as well as your disbursement forms yearly. So I want to make sure that you understand that. We have to have those forms back. And again, we'll be sending that information to you. If it's that we haven't received information in a timely manner, then of course your Bell Scholar will reach out to you, or another member of the Victor Bell Scholarship team will correspond with you, or they may even call you to see if something has changed and how we can get that information back so you can maintain your Bell Award. So again, I mentioned this just a moment ago, but I just want to say it one more time, is if your address is changing, let us know. If your phone number has changed, if your email has changed, let us know so we can update our information. Now, I know sometimes our Bell Scholars like to use their district email. So if you're using your district email, when you get in your senior year or close to the senior year, please try to replace that with, whether it's a Gmail email or some other type of email, because once you graduate from high school, your district or your school email address will no longer work. And that means that we cannot correspond with you. So again, we like to have parent email addresses. So parents, we need to make sure your email address is current with us, and students make sure we have an up-to-date email address for you as well. So we cannot process your disbursement without your transcript. So we talked about that. So make sure you're getting that information to us as soon as you can. Now also, we're getting a few questions about GPA requirements. So if you're a 7th or 8th grader right now, so no lower than a 1C in any course on your final report card. So for grades 7 through 12, at least a 2.25 GPA, and college, at least a 2.0 GPA. And so we get to see your information, so we know you guys are working really hard, and we appreciate how hard you're working during this COVID-19 pandemic. Now, if at any point that you find out that you're having some type of extenuating circumstances that prevent you from meeting your requirements, make sure you're reaching out to our Victor Bell Scholarship team. So whether that's someone in our main office or reach out to your Bell advisor. So don't stop communicating with us. We want to hear from you. We need to hear from you. And we want to know what's happening, because things happen within our personal lives. And sometimes that might affect our ability to perform. So make sure you stay in touch with us and communicate. So you'll see a link here, some information, and we'll definitely be able to share this information with you. We'll also email this PowerPoint to you, so make sure you connect with your Bell advisor so that we can get this information to you. Now, a few other things I just want to say before Juana starts presenting and wrapping up is that hopefully you guys are receiving our Victor Bell newsletter. So we send out a newsletter to our Bell families and students at least a couple times a year. So if you're not getting it, that means that we probably don't have the most current email address for you. So please, please, please get that information to us as soon as you can. We're also doing something new for Bell this year. So we want to do a Bell Senior Salute. So please let us know if you're a senior and you're on the webinar. Please connect with your Bell advisor or our Bell team at our main office and let us know where you're headed. So where are you going once you finish, or what are you doing once you finish high school? We love to hear that information and to be able to share information with other Bell scholars. And if you're ever interested in providing an article for our newsletter, also let your Bell advisor know. We try to highlight our middle school students to let other Bell scholars know what they're doing. And also if you're a high school student, or if you're a graduating senior, or even into college, we've had some of our college Bell scholars write articles for us so that you know what's happening, what they're doing. And we're so very proud of you as Bell scholars. You guys are doing some amazing things, and we want to make sure that we celebrate your accomplishments. And a couple other things, and I don't know if Amy or Juana want to chime in before we get to the end, is that I hope that you guys, if you're a senior, are hearing about our Countdown to College event. So the whole month of October, we are giving some extra support to you as a senior regarding RDS. So you've heard quite a bit about that this evening. We're giving extra support for applications for admission, as well as FAFSA. So just want to make sure that you're aware of that. And so of course, the weeks of October 19th through the 30th, there are certain colleges and universities that are waiving their application fee if you're a senior and applying using your CFNC log on our website. So if you want a comprehensive list of that, you can definitely go to our website, cfnc.org, and access Countdown to College, and you'll see that information. We also have several different calendar events that are going on, and we have that also on our website. So different things related to admission. We have information related to financial aid again, if you want to hear that information again. So lots of different events. And I think we have one more FAFSA Day event that's happening this week, actually tomorrow, I think if I'm right, Amy and Juana. And so we can definitely put that information in the chat, or you can contact your Bell advisor, and we'll make sure that you hear about that as well. So I think that's all that I wanted to say. And I'm going to turn it over to Juana, and she's going to wrap us up.
Thank you, Tequila. So I just want to remind everyone that we do have social media, and we're inviting you to follow us on social media and stay updated with all the great events that we have going on. We actually have the schedule, the events that Tequila was talking about in regards to Countdown to College, but we're always sharing really great tools and resources for you all. So we invite you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram. And one of the things that we started doing this year is we actually have a playlist for Bell Scholars. So you will be able to find this presentation along with other presentations on the Bell Scholars YouTube playlist for you to access. And so we invite you to follow us, show us some love, please. And then also we move on to the next slide. So many of you have probably already connected and met with your, at least I'm hoping, with your Bell advisors. And we all each also have our Instagram accounts and our Facebook accounts. And if you go to the CFNC College Foundation of North Carolina Facebook account, you can actually find us there as well by typing our name and then @CFNC. But just in case, if you all need a reminder of who your Bell advisor is or their contact information, you can find it here. If you or your family need information or are looking for services in Spanish, you are welcome to contact me or my colleague, Juanes Ramirez. We're happy to answer any questions and just, to support you in any way that we can. We move on to the next slide. So if you have questions, you can call our call center or email bellscholarship@cfi.org. Just remember that we are here to support you any step of the way. And now I believe we have time. There's times for questions.
And if certainly there are none tonight, Juana, like you've reminded them, they can reach out to us at our email addresses or personal telephone numbers. Those are our telephone numbers. If you'll bounce back, Tequila, one more slide. And let's show them our contact numbers again. So those are our cell phones that you can text us if you have any questions too. Sometimes that's just easier and you're more comfortable than calling us. Feel welcome to text us if you have any questions or want a review of some information we've talked about tonight. So whatever we can do to help, we're here for you guys. Any final comments before we close out?
Well, I just want to say that, we are going to have a few other web events that are going to be coming up. And so one of them is going to be helping you to understand your Bell Award more as a senior. So we just gave a few highlights, but we are going to talk about that a little bit more and just how our CFNC website works. So we'll be sharing some additional information. So again, if you're not receiving our newsletters or you're not receiving correspondence, please connect with your Bell advisor and we'll definitely make sure you get that information. But I see Haley here. Hi, Haley. And so, but anyway, so I was driving a little bit tonight, so I apologize that you guys made it, maybe not, got a chance to see my face the whole time. But again, do you see anything else in the chat?
Nope, I think we're good.
Okay.
Thank you for joining. Have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, guys.